Hello students, this is Mr. D'Amico with another math lesson for you. Today we are going to be continuing on our adventure of solving quadratics by completing the square. And it's the moment you've been waiting for. It is part 2, the quadratic strikes back. So if you join me together, we will be able to rule the galaxy and solve all of the quadratic equations by completing the square. All right, recall that our goal from the previous lesson was to solve quadratic equations by completing the square, and we did list some rules for solving quadratics on our last worksheet. There's the rules there for you. There is one new rule this time, which we will see shortly. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to set y equal to 0, and actually there is no y in this first problem, so what we can do is just move the 12x over to the other side, and we have it already set equal to 0. Part 2 says move the c value to the other side, so I'm going to add 48. And then we are just about ready to complete the square, but the new step for today is step 3, factor out the greatest common factor if possible. So the greatest common factor of 6x squared and 12x is 6. So I will factor out a 6, leaving us with x squared plus 2x, and that equals 48. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to complete the square with the leftover b value that's inside the parentheses. In this case, that would be a 2. So I'm going to do step 4 using this b value 2 right here. Take that 2, divide it by 2, and then square it, which will give me 1 squared, which is 1. And then I'm going to take that value, and remember I need to add that to both sides. There's a little twist with this today. So if I add 1 to the left side, right there, all right, I'm going to add 1. Now, if you look closely, I'm adding 1 by writing that, but really it's 6 times 1. So if I want to keep both sides of the equation equal, I can't add 1 here because, again, I'm writing down plus 1, but it really has a value of 6 because I factored out the 6. 6 times 1 is 6. So to balance out the equation, I would have to add a 6 over here to compensate. Again, that's plus 1, but since there's a 6 outside the parentheses, 6 times 1 is 6. To make the equation equal, I would have to add a 6 to this side. And then I am going to factor into a binomial squared. That's step 5. After I simplify the right side there to 54, recall that to factor to the binomial squared, we ask ourselves what number times itself equals 1, and that goes here. Or we can check to see what this value is before we square it, which is positive 1, and that would go there as well. So that becomes an x plus 1. And sorry about that, we'll cross that out because we don't need that. That's a second problem for later. Last step is to solve. So what I'm going to do now is divide both sides by 6. That'll cancel out the 6's and give me x plus 1 quantity squared equals 9. The next step would be to do the opposite of squaring, which is taking the square root of both sides. Remember that when you square root something that's squared, they're opposite operations, so they'll cancel out. When you take the square root of a number, you get a positive and a negative answer. So this becomes x plus 1 equals plus or minus 3. Then I will continue by subtracting 1 from both sides. And then I'm going to be left with x equals positive 3 minus 1 and x equals negative 3 minus 1, or x equals 2 and negative 4. And remember that when we solve a quadratic, we're really looking for the x-intercepts because that's where the parabola crosses the x-axis. So if we wanted to write them as x-intercepts, our final answer would be 2, 0, and negative 4, 0. So there we have solved our first quadratic by completing the square. Second quadratic is 4x squared plus 24x plus 36 equals 0. Now this is already set equal to 0, which is nice. Let's move the c value over by subtracting 36 from both sides. So we can do that like so. And now we're going to do that next step, factor out the greatest common factor if possible. Well, we have 4x squared and 24x, so I can factor a 4 out of there, leaving me with x squared plus 6x. And then again, my new b value again is 6. So I'm going to do 6 divided by 2 and then square it, which is 3 squared or 9. And then I'm going to add 9. But now remember, I can't just add 9 to both sides because we factored out a 4. So by writing plus 9 here, with the 4 outside the parentheses, that's really 4 times 9, or 36. So I'm really adding 36 to this side, since 4 times 9 again is 36. So to compensate for that, to keep the equation equal, I must add 36 to that side as well. And then I am going to simplify. So that's going to be negative 36 plus 6, or 0. And then I want to factor into a binomial squared. So again, what number times itself equals positive 9 and also adds to be positive 6? Well, that would be positive 3. Or I can look up here for the positive 3 as well and put that there. So now I have x plus 3 in the parentheses. Let's continue solving by dividing both sides by 4. 4's will cancel out. 0 divided by 4 is 0, so I have x plus 3 quantity squared equals 0. Time to do the opposite of squaring, which is taking the square root of both sides. The square root of 0 is 0. There is no such thing as negative 0, so there is no plus or minus 0, which means this parabola is only going to cross the x-axis at negative 3, 0. It's going to basically touch the x-axis at negative 3, 0, which will also be the vertex. And our solution is x equals negative 3 or negative 3, 0. Our final problem, let's, we don't have to set anything equal to 0 because there's no y. And if you look, the c value is already on the right side of the equal sign. So I think I'm just going to subtract 8x for this one and get 2x squared minus 8x equals negative 10. So the c value is already moved over to the other side. I'm already in shape now and ready to factor out the greatest common factor, which would be 2. So if I do that, that'll leave me with x squared minus 4x. And then I can go ahead and complete the square with the negative 4. So I can go negative 4 divided by 2 squared, which is negative 2 squared, which is positive 4. And then I'm going to add 4 right there. But again, if I'm adding 4 here, since this is a 2 on the outside, it's really 2 times 4, which is 8. So I should be adding 8 right there, which I did. And then I can start to simplify and factor into a binomial squared. The right side would be negative 2. And then I can say what number times itself equals 4 and also adds to be negative 4. That would be negative 2. And this negative 2 also we can use if we want to put there as well. There's your x minus 2. Let's continue to solve. Divide both sides by 2. The 2 will cancel, leaving us with x minus 2 quantity squared equals negative 1. The opposite of squaring is taking the square root of both sides. And then I've run into this situation once before where I can't square root a negative. That's actually an imaginary number, which we will learn about in the next few lessons. So for right now, we're going to write no solution because there is no real solution to this quadratic. If we want to think of the parabola, since there is no real solution, this parabola will not cross the x-axis. and it would look something like this. Please try the back side problems right now. There's 2 problems on the back of the paper, and be ready with questions in class for tomorrow. Great job. Together we solved the quadratics. Using the force helped us. Continue to use the force on the backside, and like I said, we can rule the galaxy together. In the words of Darth Vader, have a great night. See you tomorrow, and trust your feelings when you're solving these problems. Bye, guys.